Welcome to Ace Interpretations, a podcast about asexuality, fandom, and where they intersect. Today's episode 3, is about coming out as asexual. I am one of the co-hosts. You can call me KK.
I'm Quartic.
And I'm Love the Heaven.
So, as those of you who have been with us since the first episode kind of know, we are 3 people who identify as asexual, as well as some other things. We each kind of have our own differences. And it's just, and I guess the funny thing for me is doing this, that coming out is never really done in anything.
Yeah.
For any of us. No matter what you identify as.
You mean not over? Like, it's not finished. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, because you have to do with, every new person at some point.
It's an ongoing process. It's interesting, because, just last week, I finally checked off the last person on my... I had this mental list of people I need to come out to in person. Mm-hmm. Family members, basically. Because I was entertaining the idea of doing a Facebook post. And to be clear, I'm, not on Facebook. I think I'm curious, I want to look this up. I think the last personal post I made to Facebook was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So people don't really expect me to be on Facebook, but I'm like, you know what? It's a good way to reach a lot of people at once, I guess, who might be That's acquaintances true. Of mine. Certainly the people who I only know in passing or old classmates or something. I'm not going to text them, dig up their phone number and be like, hey, do you remember me? We sat next to each other in that one psychology course, and by the way, but it's if they happen to check in on me, I don't even know why. This is a whole other thing. Getting back to my earlier point, we'll come back around to this later, I'm sure.
Someday.
Yeah. So, but before I could put a post on Facebook, which I haven't actually done, although I know which picture I'm going to use if I do, I was like, well, there's some people who shouldn't learn of it from Facebook, It was my aunts in particular. Some of them live very far away. They shouldn't find out from Facebook. I should tell them in person. There was one aunt I told over the phone. And it was the day after National Coming Out Day. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, that's close enough that I can kind of use that as a conversational springboard, which I did. I was like, so yesterday was National Coming Out Day. It was very nice lead-in. Versus but actually, the only reason I did that is I'm very allergic to bed bugs, and I went to the movies and I got bit on both hands and basically lost the use of my hands for a day, and so I couldn't. It was hard to hold a book. Mm-hmm. So that limited my reading, and then I just got bored of Netflix. So I was like, I'll call people.
God.
And I was like, I know who I haven't spoken to in a while, this one aunt in particular. So I call her, and come out. Mm-hmm. And then it's I could do this math. It's 4 years later, 3 or 4 years later, I finally come out to the last aunt. And I'm kind of feeling a little bad, I could have called her. She lives the furthest away from me. She lives a full 2-day drive away. But when I come out to her, I say this is a conversation I prefer to have face to face, rather than over the phone. Mm-hmm. And as I'm saying this, I'm kind of thinking although I did tell your sister over the phone, but in hindsight, I'm like, no, you know what? I did, looking at my coming out experiences, I do prefer the ones I have face to face over that one that I had over the phone. So I could, in all honesty, say I tried it over the phone once. Didn't like. It went well, but I didn't like it as much as the ones I've been able to have face to face. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Because I tried to do as many as I could in person, just because, first off, those of you who have been listening to us since the first episode know that I am bisexual and demisexual. So I knew that may cause some questions. So for me, I wanted to do as many people in person because I wanted to be able to answer any of those questions and just interact. And you don't really get that as much on a phone call because you can't like read body language. You can't do any of that.
Yeah.
I did come out on Facebook first to a lot of, a handful of people. I kind of regret it, but I did a big coming out post when I first figured out I was asexual. Asexual Awareness Week, 2013. So
represent to the second.
Well, I kind of buried the coming out as ace part at the, it was a marking the end of my relationship with my boyfriend post with a, side of this is why. And,
Oops.
So, I was like, by the way, and here's a link to, like, 101 for anyone reading this. And then after it was over, I was like, oh, I don't know who read this or not. Like, I had some idea when my grandmother messaged me and a few of my old high school friends liked it. But then, like, a month later at Thanksgiving, when I'm, in the middle of other stuff, my one cousin's like, I saw what you posted on Facebook. And I'm like, what did I post on Facebook? Oh, that. Like, kind of like, she was like, me and my mom are okay with it. I'm like, okay with what? Oh, like, it took a while. So
I can see that.
And, so that's how I came out to my aunt, I guess, indirectly through my cousin reading my Facebook post. And then later I had a face-to-face conversation with her where, in the moment I didn't quite realize she was doing you might meet the right person one day, so maybe you're not really ace thing. I didn't really react to it right in the moment. I was like, well, I am by this point 24 years old, because that was like a year later or whatever. And you'd think I would have been attracted to someone by now.
Like the thing.
On the plus side, silver lining, you get to mark another square on your ace bingo card. So.
Oh, that's true.
Yes.
That's an important talk to have.
So what are all the other squares on ace bingo?
There's a lot of. I was looking him up. I was like, oh, hey, there's actually like several different ace bingo cards that were, done.
Invented?
Yeah.
I both love this at the same time. I'm terrified.
Some of them are like I don't know, like kind of not too specific, because it's like I'm sure that's actually been a comment, but it's sort of like I almost prefer the bingo cards where it's like the well-intentioned comments that you get over and over again, rather than just like some of these are just like
really extreme, harsh reactions.
Yeah, just like I'm going to start insulting you now. And these are all the insults I've received. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, so the first few times I tried coming out, I in retrospect, I realized part of the issue is I was presenting it as a bad thing. Like, I didn't mean to. I had finally accepted I was ace after a lot of angsting over it, and I was sure of it, and I was glad to be ace, wasn't I? But I was still, like, kind of holding on to shame or something. So when I came out, I kind of, like, acted a little weird about it. Like, unfortunately I'm ace attitude almost. Like, and so I think they were reacting to that with their reassuring, well, not everyone meets the right person, young kind of attitude. So I didn't take it as an insult that they weren't understanding me, even in the moment. I could tell they were trying to be nice. They just didn't quite understand, because I didn't have any practice explaining it yet, and I did it really clumsily, and I was like, half on the verge of tears, I think at least one of the times, and I was like, kind of a mess. So, but I got a lot better at it over time, because like you said, you keep coming out to new people. There's a lot of people that you can practice coming out to.
So there's a fun note for everyone, is that you're never done coming out, and you're gonna get better at it. It's like when you practice a speech for a presentation at school. You're going to get to do it several times, and you're going to learn the nice, abridged, easy way to do it.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
You do keep coming out. But you know what? I just want to put in a caveat here that you don't have to come out. Because we're going to talk a lot about coming out, and it was...
Yeah, you even said you felt bad that you didn't come out sooner to someone, but you don't owe anyone your coming out story. You're not required to come out. Like, yeah.
Exactly. It was...
It's true. And actually, so I kind of have a note about this. So what most people don't know is that I did not come out until actually, like, about a year ago. And I'm in my mid-20s. Because here's the thing. So the family, my whole family, or at least my whole immediate family, we were raised with this whole mentality of like, everyone's good. Whoever you want to love, however you want to love them, as long as no one's getting hurt, as long as you're not getting like emotionally abused, like whatever. So I grew up in this positive environment. And I grew up knowing that I had a gay family member, and I, grew up having gay friends. So even once I figured everything out, I didn't really feel a need to come out because, at least for me, it was like, I can bring anyone home. My mom's not going to kick me out. Nothing bad's going to happen. So I didn't feel the need to. I only decided to because, at least to me, I kind of hit this point of, I realized it was like, no one really knows. And that is a piece of me. And I kind of want people to know. Yeah. And so then I went through and I was like, okay, close friends, immediate family. These are the people I care about. And these are the people I would like to know. Everyone else, don't care.
Yeah, I think, honestly, I could spend like an hour just talking about each of my coming out experiences, but I kind of want to keep things like a little more general.
I think we all could probably just go on and on about how.
Oh, so many, because they're all different. It's like, for me, one of the reasons, like a big impetus for coming out, at least at the start, was kind of like I joined up with this in real life ACE meetup group and being like really active socially, going to museums and movies and lunch and dinner and like having a grand old time. And, I wanted to share with family, like, oh, what are you up to? What are you doing? And I want to share like, oh, my life's really good right now. There's a lot of positive in it. I'm doing things. I'm meeting people. It's great. And then I would like talk around like, how do I know these people? Like, oh yeah, like I would kind of maybe pass them off as like college friends or like friends of friends or, and it was just really weird. And I try and be a generally honest person. And I was kind of like, I just want to tell you what's actually going on here. It's an asexual meetup group. Now I got to explain that term. And it's kind of a downer because I really just wanted to share like, oh, I'm having this fun group with these friends. I want to talk about the cool museum that I went to. And instead I have to like put that on pause and now explain my orientation and answer questions about it. But this is a story that I tell a lot to new aces who join the group because coming out is a pretty popular talking topic when we aren't talking about like Marvel or whatever dogs.
What other nerdy thing we're into?
Yeah, if we're not talking about nerdy stuff and we're actually talking about ace stuff, and there's new people, we like to talk about coming out. And so one of the things is that the very first encounter I had with the term asexual was with a heart-to-heart with a friend from high school. And then she was confiding in me that her sister had come out as ace. And she was brought to tears by this. So she was crying on my shoulder about her sister being ace. She didn't use the word ace, though. She used the word asexual. Because her belief was that her sister would grow up to be alone and a spinster.
Has this friend not heard about cats and dogs? None of us are alone. Get a lizard.
Not really the point.
Yeah.
No, but I'm just saying.
I mean, and then the sister went on to date my brother. So, again, asexual doesn't mean aromantic.
Nope.
And so I just assumed from context that I kind of grasped what asexual meant. And I didn't question my understanding of the term. And it just it framed it in this sort of negative light. Being asexual will make other people cry. Which is kind of interesting. Like, it makes other people cry. Like, I didn't think that her sister herself was very unhappy. It made however. And then whenever I tell the story, I say, in defense of this friend who gave me my first bad experience with the word asexual, she was also the first person to just suggest that I wasn't straight in passing. Totally casual, we're just sitting on the swings, having a talk, and she mentions do you ever get a boyfriend or a girlfriend? And then just keeps going. And that was super gratifying because I was sort of questioning at the time.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, you've paid enough attention to me to realize I might not be interested in guys. And that was like, and then just didn't make a big deal about it. I'm like, oh, thank you for noticing. You know, that felt really good. So I don't hold it against her too much that, that my introduction to the word asexual was sort of negative. But because of that, because I myself jumped to assumptions, and then even later when I was a sophomore in college, and my boyfriend at the time suggested, like, well, maybe you're asexual, and I'm like, oh no, I'm not that. I mean, I was really honest. I was honest about my lack of attraction to him, like going into it, but
yeah,
I was like, well, maybe it'll develop over time. I don't know. But yeah, because then I was conflating asexuality with aromanticism, and now it's even funnier because I'm also aromantic, but it was just not really understanding the terms. So if I ever come out to people, I feel like this sort of responsibility or this obligation, like I want to properly explain it. And if they say, oh yeah, I know what that is, I'm like, okay, but do you really? Because I thought I knew what it was, and I was wrong. And I could have come to terms with myself, my identity, years sooner if I had just stopped and asked questions at that time. So it's like every time so then, as you say, it's like it's a lot of work, that you can't just say, oh, just drop it, I'm asexual, and then like leave it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, let me break it down for you. You might have questions. Sometimes they don't have questions, and then I'll kind of, it's weirdly I don't know if it's defensive or not. Like, I'll bring up some of the common negative reactions to kind of explain where I'm coming from, like why this is a big deal.
And actually, real fast, I just want to say, another point of defense for your friend and her reaction was not sadness at the fact that her sister was asexual. Her reaction was sadness that she thought her sister was just going to be alone.
Exactly.
And honestly, like, that's kind of heartwarming, where it's like, you don't care at, like, what's causing it. Your worry is that she's just going to be alone.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't like, oh, my sister is, some aberrant sexuality.
Yeah.
It was like,
I don't want her to be alone. I don't want her to be isolated. Although I must also admit that mentality, like, is a whole nother rant I have about society's pressures about, like, being in a relationship. But that's for another day.
Matter-normativity.
Yeah.
You don't want that rant right now.
But yeah, I mean, I've seen some really great posts on Tumblr about coming out, just in general, and how you're under no obligation, you don't have to. When I was still questioning, sorry if I'm monopolizing the conversation, but when I was still...
You're good. I think we've actually all, like, taken little windows to just kind of, like, here's a huge chunk of me on the table.
Yeah. I'll take my turn next.
Okay, yeah, because I definitely want to hear from you, Love the Heaven. So people who know me sometimes say that I overthink things, and I don't refute that. So when I was questioning, and I was like, okay, I felt like I had to figure this out. Because if I hold on, let me get this. The thinking is kind of definitely screwy, like, looking in hindsight. I'm like, that was my logic? So it takes a bit for me to remember what exactly my process was. Basically, it was the idea, like, I am self-confident in myself. Like, yeah, I don't let other people judge me or put me down. I don't care what other people think. I march to my own drum. Therefore, if I am queer, I should come out of the closet. Like, it's important to come out of the closet to prove that I am self-confident and I'm not ashamed. But I couldn't figure out what closet I was supposed to be coming out of. And I was like, oh, I need to come out, like, if it turns out I am gay, right? I need to come out before I bring a girlfriend home. Because that's doing things in the wrong order. I can't bring a girlfriend home and then come out. But I also couldn't know for sure if I was gay without first having had a girlfriend to, like, test the hypothesis. So it was like this catch-22 of, like, I need to come out before I basically I needed to come out before I figured out whether I was gay or not. It was such a and basically I just kind of ran in circles in my head because I would, like, just look at girls.
Well, and I was about to say, small point here, where it's like, you don't necessarily have to date a girl to know you like girls.
No, this is me not knowing.
Sometimes you just kind of go through a moment and you're like, oh, nope, there it is. That's there.
Yeah, this is me not knowing that asexuality was an option.
Yeah, that's a very ace thing to start thinking.
Boys or girls.
Yeah. Yeah, so I did the same. I have to actually try it before I know for sure I'm not straight, right, or whatever kind of thing.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
It'd be so embarrassing if I came out and then it turned out I was wrong. But just putting out, no, it isn't. Like, that is a legitimate thing. That's fine. Like, you shouldn't feel the pressure of, like, oh, but what if I'm wrong? It's like, just be yourself.
Life is all about trial and error, and you know what? Your sexuality and relationships in general are all about experiences. That's what it comes down to. And the only way you gain that is by doing it. And again, sometimes doing it is that you just have this little moment where you see a girl in the distance and you're like, you know what? Yeah. I'd hit that. And sometimes it's not.
Well, the heaven, do you want to take this window?
Sure, yes. So, there's lots of things I could say. One thing I was going to say is that, I really like explaining asexuality, because for such a long time, I was ace and had no idea. Even when I first learned about asexuality as a term, I still took way too long to use it to describe myself, because I didn't understand what it was. It wasn't quite the, first impression that Quartic got, but it was a different, I still already was too old, and I had some kind of idea that being allosexual was an intrinsic, important part of the human experience, of the full emotional experiences that people have, and that, it was probably bad to be asexual. Somewhere deep down in my head, I was really avoiding wanting to be that. And I didn't have very many experiences yet. I'd never kissed anyone, I think, when I first heard the word and stuff. I'd never, really gotten to a point where I knew all the things that I didn't like for sure, and that I just, needed a word to describe it. I wasn't, already really self-aware enough to realize I wasn't attracted to people and stuff. It was a much more complicated, drawn-out process of figuring myself out. And when people talk about, coming out to your closest family members, I lived with my dad and my brother, but I didn't have to really come out to them exactly, especially my dad, because while I was figuring myself out, I already was, talking about it with them. I wasn't even out to myself yet when I was coming out to the people that were closest to me, including eventually my boyfriend at the time. It was kind of at the same time. Having a boyfriend finally when I was 23 was a good, I was like, I think I might be asexual, but I'm not sure. This is what I'm reading. This is what I'm thinking about, kind of thing. It didn't feel like coming out because I wasn't even out to myself yet. I wasn't even, ready. But I was already, being as open as possible. I don't want to, I was just an open book, kind of. And so when, my dad and my boyfriend were asking, did you get your hormones checked? It was also a kind of question I was wondering, should I get my hormones checked? It didn't feel like an invalidating thing, although it kind of is. It's one of those standard responses that aces really shouldn't get when they're coming out, especially now in 2018. But back then, it was kind of I knew the place they were coming from. I was in the same place myself. This, doubting asexuality can even be real, but wanting to be accepting of it if it is, and kind of attitude. So that was my very first coming out experiences, and I'm still kind of stuck on some of that stuff. I've seen on the Asexual Agenda blog that one of the tropes in asexual fiction is the ace explanation, which they explain as an example of truth in fiction, where coming out as ace simply involves a lot of explaining to a lot of people, where you have to, where people just don't already know. Where eventually we can just say, you know, I'm ace, and it's the same as saying I'm gay, where people have, you know what it means. But we're a long way off from everyone possibly already knowing what that is. There's a lot more people who do know already. And I feel in this awkward middle ground where if someone doesn't ask questions, I can't tell if they really do know, because they might at this point in time, or if they just are afraid to ask questions, where or they just aren't interested in my life enough. And I'm like, why aren't you interested? But no, depends on the person. But, that kind of thing. And, at this point, coming out, is such a different thing than it used to be for me. Now, it's become a really big part of my life, the fact that I'm asexual. I do various asexual activism things. I started this podcast, for instance. So,
people.
If I want to tell people that the three of us are doing a podcast, I gotta kind of be honest about a lot of things. Be like, well, you see, there's this fandom thing that's hard to explain, and then there's this asexual thing that's hard to explain. No.
So which hard to explain thing would you like me to start on first?
Right. And, I was just thinking, for me, I do relate to coming out arcs for gay and bi characters, lesbian characters, where coming out is kind of the end of the angst, the conclusion of the angst. For me, it was most of the angst was before I was ready to come out. And once I was coming out, I got better, much, much less of that, shame and other bad feelings, and a lot more, happy about things. It was good that I was able to come out, and I was lucky because I was in an environment where people already basically accepted gay people, at least the vast majority of people I'm talking to, and even bisexuality to some degree, although a lot of these straight people don't really get it. So I've found...
Yeah, no, I hit that wall.
And, actually, when I figured out way later, much more recently, that I'm sort of gray pan-romantic, a lot of people don't know that part of my story yet. I kind of came out as hetero-romantic when I first figured myself out, so I gotta re-come out as, well, more like aromantic, wait, no, maybe gray pan-romantic. I'm not really, let me explain again. And every time they're asking me, what's the difference between romantic attraction and, friendship, and I'm like, well, you see, you're asking the wrong person here, hence the other identities in the gray area that I kind of latch onto,
You know what, I'm just gonna say it. I think we all just need to make PowerPoints. I think we all just think about the most common questions and make PowerPoints for when we come out to people.
I have a really long explanation when people ask me the difference between romantic attraction and friendship, but the short answer is, I don't know, sorry. But yeah, it's this thing that's complicated, and I have come out to people that are more like acquaintances, and at that point I really don't care if I take the no big deal approach and don't explain. If I don't know the person really, but I still feel like casually mentioning that, oh, and by the way, because I'm asexual, I marched in Pride, which, yes, I did, that can be the whole conversation. That's oh, yeah, cool, I'm glad you had fun yesterday. That can be the gist of it, and I'm just kind of trying to throw ace awareness into the world without really caring if it's perfect. And, yes.
Now I feel like I really overplanned all of mine. Well, because going into it, of course, again, I felt a little more secure in most of my coming out. Because again, it's I had grown up with my mom being bring home a boy or a girl as long as they're nice to you.
It's really good.
And I was okay. So it's okay, so on the upside, I could bring home a boy or a girl. On the downside, pretty sure she does not know what demisexual is. So for all my coming out things, I purposefully isolated the person with me and plotted kind of what I wanted to do. So for my mom, we had gone to hang out with a friend of hers at this new brewery that opened up. And so on the car ride back, I told her, and I ended up getting into a debate with her where she was I don't know why you feel like you have to come out to me. And I was because it's a part of me. And she was like, well, no, I don't feel like you need to do that. Like, really, just bring home whoever you like a fish person at this. And so I ended up getting into a debate with my mom about labels. And how I was not labeling myself. I was basically using vocab words to describe myself to you in greater detail.
Yep.
Which was fun. And again, my dad, I had to call him because he was away. But I called him and I had like this very serious talk with him. He was a lot more serious about it, where he honestly was like, I really don't want you to label yourself. And I'm like, that's not, no. Please stop. And again, then my brother who was with him came home and he was like, do you want to tell your brother now? And I was like, yeah, sure. And he legitimately, I heard him on the phone say, you should go get a drink first. This is a Whopper. And he said it kind of sarcastically, but at the same time, I was like, really?
That stings. Yeah, that's not good.
It did a little bit. And then my brother came on with the drink, and he was like, okay, so what is it you have to tell me? And I was like, I'm bisexual, demisexual. And he was like, and Dad told me to get a drink? And I was like, I'm pretty sure he was sarcastic. Like, fairly certain. But then and then I had to have the debate of what demisexual is with him, because for some reason he was like, that's not one of those ones where, like, you think you're a dragon or something, is it? And I was like, no. I feel like you would have noticed that by now. I would have started to hoard things.
That's a different direction. Yeah, I have, like when I tell my dad that, like, I have a ace friend who thought she was bisexual because she was equally not attracted to both genders before she figured out she was asexual. My first, part of that sentence, thought she was bisexual when really she's asexual. He's like, wait a minute, how is that even possible? Because he has all these, like, and he's still stuck on, like, bisexuals, maybe being hypersexual or something, and I have to explain it, or, like, how is it possible that some aces like sex? And even if it's not my experience, a lot of times, because I'm an ace activist, I'm trying to explain it, trying to be a good ally to all the things, all the queer identities that come up in our conversations, and that includes things like demisexuality. And so I have seen around, not necessarily as much in person with demisexuality, but I've seen people have sometimes an even harder time accepting that there's, like, a good reason to use the label, and it's like, no, there are reasons. There reasons.
There really is a logical reason, because I debated that with myself for a long time. When I was first dealing with it, there was a whole process where I was like, oh, geez, where I was like, I'm asexual, but I was like, but that doesn't quite fit. And so there was literally like a good hour or so where I kind of like sat there with myself, like, alone in my dorm room at the time, being like, that fits, and at the same time it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I actually did go, like, word hunting, because I was like, because I cannot be the only person. There's no way with the billions of people on the planet that I am the only person that has ever had this. And so I went online, and again, like, you find vocab words that help you to describe to other people.
I'm thinking, I mean, it's still a related note, but it's kind of an unrelated note in that, like, this is a very specific thing that, again, it's not very general, and it doesn't really give pointers to. I think we should give pointers, like.
I don't know if any of us are qualified, okay? I spent an awkward car drive back to a ball.
What were you going to say? Just say it.
Tips or advice for someone who's, like, listening to us talking about coming out and is wondering, like, what do do to prepare, or what is the mindset? Anyway, so my sort of going back to the Facebook coming out thing, it's just kind of, if I'd gotten the timing better, I would have put it up still in June, because then it could be like,
Pride
well,
Month.
we all had a happy Pride, for those of you who observe it, what have you.
Coming out can be a year-round thing. Do not worry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, do not worry about Pride Month. Pride Month can just be a nice entry point to the conversation.
Yeah, I would just love to couch it in those sort of Pride thing, because I have a great picture of me under, like, this balloon arch of, like, a rainbow balloon arch, because I went to, like, a Pride festival. And I like that it just is very unapologetic, like, put that rainbow out there, put it, that I am actively ace. This isn't something I'm questioning. I've got my t-shirt, I've got my flag, I've got the rainbow arch, don't doubt me, don't question my sincerity, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's like also just like, hey, happy Pride, like, super casual. Like, I'm not even coming out. I'm just saying I totally enjoyed Pride.
Yeah, and I do like how you said the unapologetic phrasing, because that's exactly what I did wrong the first few times I came out. I was apologizing, I think. Without even, like, planning it. Well, I was caught off guard most of the time, to be fair, but I was, like, there was one person who was like, wait a minute, are you not straight? And I'm like, like, you know.
Wait, you didn't even, like, kind of plan it?
Well, she wasn't even someone I knew that well. I was like, it was a complicated thing. She was like my aunt's best friend. She was like there all weekend, and she just kept talking, and she could tell I was reacting weird when she kept making comments about when I have a husband one day or whatever. It was a weird person. But then after she like asked me point blank, I'm like, well, I'm asexual. And she was the first person who was like, I think I almost could understand that because I just heard of pansexual, like, yesterday kind of attitude. Like, I've had people who tell me, oh, yeah, my brother's, like, into that non-binary stuff. I'm like, well, actually, asexual is a little different than agender, but that's great that you're pro it. Like, you know.
Like, we're glad you're accepting other people, but that's not the right category.
Yeah, no, I just came out at work to someone, who was, like, noticing the Ask Me About Asexuality pin I have put surreptitiously on my purse that was under my desk, but she happened to be sitting at my desk at the time, and she was like, so what's that, thing that you said I should ask you about? And I'm like, oh, well, sort of like the opposite of bisexuality, I guess, on a simple explanation where if you're bisexual, you're attracted to men and women, and when you're asexual, you're not finding them hot or sexy, either of those genders. Like, I just try to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah, no, it's like I have a gay man's interest in women and a lesbian's interest in men.
I tried to say that once, and someone just thought I said I was a lesbian. Like, I tried that. And
you know what? That's actually a good point. If you're a woman and you throw the word lesbian out there, I was like, get this automatic reaction of, oh.
Well, that was when I was in a queer platonic relationship with a guy, and I was trying to explain, well, I'm just as attracted to him as a lesbian would be. It didn't work. It didn't.
It does not click for people usually.
No.
Like, I can see where someone would get confused by that.
But yeah, we'll talk about queer platonic stuff in another episode. But at this point, I just was it's pretty fun. It's I find the experience to be unexpected and exciting and generally pretty positive lately. I like coming out to people. I come out way more than the average person. I'm not a good example, but I come out, and I am out as ace because I've made it a big deal in my life, and I enjoy and it's still, even coming out as, like, much as possible, pretty much, it's still a pretty invisible orientation. It's still something people aren't going to guess about me unless I bring it up myself. And it's just kind of, you know, a part of my life, and it's a part of my fandom life for sure too. It's actually, I came out to my YouTube subscribers, which were my main fandom community, as soon as I figured it out for sure. I basically, I broke up with my boyfriend, and I was like, well, now I'm sitting at home twiddling my thumbs. Let's make a fan video. It is Asexual Awareness Week, after all. And I just kind of, like, it wasn't really a fan video, but it was on my fan video channel, and I used, like, one clip from a TV show and a bunch of just pictures I downloaded off Google, and, like, by the way, asexuality exists, and that's what I am, kind of nothingness, and that's what I did.
Though when I came out to my sister, this was like a super long cross-country road trip, and I'm like, okay, this is gonna be a great time to come out, you know. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm asexual, and she's like, yeah, our stepbrother told me, and I'm like, what?
He stole my thunder.
He was in high school at the time, or not. He might have still been in middle school, and I'm like, okay, he doesn't know coming out etiquette. He doesn't know that you're not supposed to out people. To be fair, when I came out to him and my stepsister, I hadn't really made it out to be like a super big deal. Like I consider myself, I use the Pirates of the Caribbean approach. I wait for the opportune moment. So I'm just, it's like, okay, it's like being in a closet with the door wide open. Like if anyone looks and like they'll see that, hey, yeah, oh, I can see you in that ace closet over there. It's like, yeah, hi, totally open about the fact that I'm in this closet. But that I kind of, I'll come out if anyone asks, about like, oh, relationship. Anyway, it doesn't give me a good window, for coming out. So like with my step siblings, we were sitting on the couch watching TV and there's like some commercial and they start arguing about whether this particular guy in a shampoo commercial is attractive. And I kind of put in my 2 cents. Well, actually, I'm the wrong person to ask. Like,
that's sometimes when it comes up.
Yeah,
my good sir,
okay,
or madam.
I saw my opportunity and I seized it. Because I can't really. I'm not attracted to guys. Like, let me tell you about asexuality during this commercial break before the show comes back.
I have a 3-minute window here. Let's go.
Yeah, and so that was fun. One of the early coming outs. But then I guess he told my sister, and I was like, oh well. Do you have any questions? And then, same thing happened when my dad told my stepmom, it was like, I hope it's all right that I told her. And I'm like, yeah, it honestly was all right because one less person for me to have the coming out conversation with. But I'm like, and I didn't say anything at the time, but in hindsight, I'm like, you don't out people. Like,
you don't.
You should have asked before you told her, and I would have said, yes, go ahead. Don't tell me after the fact that you told her. Like, it just, but it's that kind of coming out etiquette that, like, people who aren't in the community are maybe not as familiar with, so they don't know that that's sort of.
Don't come out unless you're prepared for the risk that they tell other people they know. I guess, is one of the pieces of tips that we might tell you.
That's so again, adding to our tips list is like, okay, pick situations where you are going to feel safe and where, again, like, you have time to answer questions.
Yeah.
And you know what? Don't tell people who might laugh.
I've saw advice that you really shouldn't do the car, and I think the people that say that are people who are really afraid of a bad reaction. The car you're trapped. Like, you're still in the car. You can't leave very easily.
And that's a good point where it's, if you are with someone who you think might have a bad reaction, maybe be in a place where either, the bad reaction will be minimalized or you have another avenue to seek shelter or safety, whatever it takes.
Yeah, just, all sorts of options. Emailing is a good safe distance to come out through, perhaps. There's also, like, bring a friend techniques, so it's not, it's you got support system right there, lots of things like that. It's complicated with asexuality because sometimes people react differently to it than they would to, say, being gay. Maybe they're homophobic, but they're still okay with you being ace. Maybe they're just really, fine with gay people because they understand that, but asexuality they still think of as broken. I mean, there's so many possibilities, and you're always, like, agonizing over that if you really... and sometimes you don't need to, but sometimes you do, and unfortunately... Yeah. I think all three of us had pretty good experiences overall without the horrible reactions.
Yeah, I would say so. And if they were bad, they were, like, minimally bad. Again, where it's, like, a couple little stinging comments, but it's, like, it's not
they weren't
that bad, frankly.
They weren't bad. They weren't, like, the horror stories. Let's just put it at that.
Yeah, the horror stories are out there.
And I will say this, little tip from me, one of the things I did do, besides planning where it's like I want to isolate each person so that I have time with just them, to let them know that they have, my full attention and that I have theirs, was that I did look up, like, commonly, like, asked questions about both bisexuality and demisexuality. That way, if they... at this point, most people kind of understood bisexuality, but I still just was like, okay, what's a good answer for all of this to help people understand?
Yeah. I found that with my experiences, it's good to be, okay with saying, you know what, I'm gonna send you a link, like, after this conversation. It's too much explanation. We don't have enough time right now, but I have your contact information, and maybe you can take your own time to read it over, and maybe you'll understand better after you read. And that is helpful, especially if I'm trying to, like, explain queer platonic and we're about to leave the vicinity, or something that's complicated, something that's, and even when it's not complicated, if I was caught off guard and not ready for the full explanation, or I just wasn't as educated as I want to be, it's okay to say I don't know in the moment and be like, you know what, I should look into that too and find the good answer for you, or whatever it is. But yeah, just better than anyone your own identity, and other people are just ignorant usually. They have good intentions, but they really are lacking the knowledge. So try to be unapologetic, but also a little bit forgiving. It all in the same thing, and be willing to answer questions if you can, but also you don't owe anyone an explanation. You can let other places, websites, be the explanation for you. You don't have to take on all the emotional labor and effort and spend the whole time being in ACE 101 class yourself. You can give them a 101 link and they can read up on it themselves.
The internet's really good for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, giving a link is especially good if you're just feeling the frustration, because, like, you get the same question, like, 30 times, but it's that person's first time asking the wrong question. The offensive, the insulting, the invalidating, like, the well-intentioned but invalidating question. And it's like, if you lash out at them, you lose an ally. Whereas, like, they come from a place of genuine ignorance most of the time. Like, we ourselves did. I didn't correct my friend when she was crying on my shoulder that, hey, you know what, asexuality doesn't have to be this bad thing you're imagining. I was complicit in ace erasure, or not even erasure. It doesn't matter.
Negative stereotypes, etc. Yeah.
It's
the key is just patience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing... Yeah, go ahead.
You've had the time to just sit there and learn you. They haven't yet.
Yeah. I will say, I'm not sure what the right... I think be prepared for, in certain social circles, mainly with peers rather than probably parents, is my experience, would be like the parent generation of people, but like your own peers generation, they might ask about if you masturbate, and that's probably one of the most commonly cited, oh my god, don't ask aces this question, but people who don't know are the ones who are going to ask it. So you want to be prepared with how you're going to answer it.
I have never been asked that.
And the best way to answer it probably is not what I do, but the best way to answer it is generally a neutral, asexuals in general may or may not masturbate type of answer, and by the way, this was inappropriate to ask kind of reaction. Same is definitely true if they ask if you've been sexually assaulted or something. It doesn't matter whether you have or not. You don't have to answer that. That was too invasive. Same with the masturbation question, but even more extreme. It's just like, this isn't the context for that kind of question. Like, the more you...
Love the heaven. I'm a little curious on your take, since you do a lot of sort of activism and have maybe talked more about coming out. Because I was thinking, about coming out in fic, and like our conversation has really focused mostly on like coming out to friends, family, and peers.
Yeah.
But a lot of the coming out fic I read focuses on coming out to your like significant other or the person you want to date,
or
like
potential significant other, or already your significant other.
Because it's that kind of like it's gonna it's that sort of will asexuality throw a wrench into the works. Trope.
Yeah, I'm on the trope page on the Asexual Agenda blog for when do I tell them I'm ace. That's a trope in ace fiction. Most often, character B is character A's love interest. That's a clear reason why character A is so afraid of rejection by character B, and they're trying to wait for the perfect time to tell them they're asexual, but they're not quite sure how to bring it up, whether to use the word asexual or just describe it. You know, is it whether it's going to be too late and they're going to feel betrayed, or too early and scare them off before you get a chance to like me properly? Yeah, it's
okay. How is asexual scary?
Well,
it's not like I'm sitting at home with a sharp knife.
I guess scare off might be the wrong phrasing. I'm paraphrasing and not quoting the article or anything.
No, you're good. I just started thinking about it where I'm like, yes.
It's more
I'm asexual. I'm at home, surrounded by spiders, and my sharp knife in hand.
I mean, generally, you are afraid that people will, you know, decide that they're not compatible with an asexual person, and therefore they don't want to date you. It is very relevant to aces who try dating, like going on a date. They do face this: when do I tell my significant other that, you know, or potential significant other, that I'm ace? And I guess it depends on how long they wait whether this is already a significant other. It also is relevant to aces who are already in a relationship when they figure out they're ace. So, right, like, this is true in real life, not just characters, that this can happen, but it also, for a lot of aces in real life, you know, not fiction, there's a less clear-cut romantic arc to it, and a lot of stories, both published fiction these days, that are often in the romance genre, or young adult novels or something, and fan fiction, have this, you know, zeroed in, zoomed in focus that, like, the only person whose reaction you care about is your love interest. The only person that you ever were, you know, that you have to come out to, or that you think about coming out to, is your love interest. And that's not really much of what I've seen, you know, in lots of real ace coming out stories. That's not usually how that works. It's not impossible. It's definitely happened. It's just not the majority. This is the way it is in fan fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is that?
So I guess what it really is that just, I mean, like, again, you can look at our stories and you can see some of this scene in a lot of fiction and a lot of fandom stuff. But there's also a lot of other experiences that happen. No two people have the same coming out experiences.
Yeah, ever. I mean, I haven't read that much ace fan fiction compared to what I could, because I kind of want to keep reading more. I mean, part of what doing this podcast is going to do for me as a host is encourage me to read more fan fiction that's ace. I really like the idea of reading it, and I read some of it, but there's so much more out there, especially this year, than there was when I first figured out I was ace or whatever, and I, you know, need to catch up and see all the tropes play out and all the examples. But as far as I've come across, I've never seen examples even of, you know, people really telling their friends when it's just a fanfic, or people telling their spouse because they finally figured themselves out after many years of being married and not really being super 100% happy with the sexual part of the marriage, or not feeling perfectly compatible, at least, or all of those things. I haven't seen that in fan fiction.
Yeah, I mean, when I was looking for fic to rec this episode, and I was like, man, why don't I have more ace fic bookmarked? I'm certain that I've read more ace fic than this. I wasn't as good about bookmarking things in the past as I am now. Now I think I over bookmark because I have this idea, like, oh, but what if I need to find it again? Because I do that a lot. Like, there was that, I'll just remember a single sentence and then I have to figure out which fic it's from, and Google's a big help. But anyway, sometimes you don't remember the sentence exactly right. But I was looking through ace fic, and I was like, oh, wasn't there like, and I'm going to crowdsource this to our listeners. Like, if you maybe rec some fic to us, if it matches these descriptions, because I'm definitely curious, like, if they fit the or not even fit the parameters, or not even, just the general, what's the word? I don't even know. Yeah,
the general idea, the concept.
Yeah, the general idea. I was trying to look if there was one of those 5-in-1 fics. You know, like 5 times someone came out as ace and 1 time they didn't have to. And I'm like, I'm almost certain that I've read something like that. Maybe in like an Avengers fandom or Spider-Man or something. But I'm like,
I mean, maybe that just makes sense. There's so many.
Yeah, but I'm like, maybe I just imagined it. I'm like, oh, but do I have to be the one to write it? I mean, like, or yeah, kind of coming out to family members, like teenagers telling parents, or not always have it like.
I did write 2 fics where teenagers came out to parents, but I'm not the best example. I haven't written very much ace fiction. Those were like my 2 main fics that had things, and they were focused on the love interest they were coming out to, but had a side plot that was significant of coming out to a parent as well, because that's just how I roll. But I really want to read a 5 times one now. That sounds like a good idea. I'm tempted to write one if I can think of a good example.
Do it.
Yeah, I found, there was one, and it was like, it's in Haven, which I haven't seen. I think I watched like the pilots of like a fandom I'm not in, and then it was like the 5 times, like the 5 coming outs of Nathan Warnos, and I started reading it, but it was like, he's got like more than one identity, so it's not like 5 times coming out as Ace. It's like coming out as Ace, coming out as Demi, and then coming out as Pan.
That's
like,
still cool. That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, it is.
That is.
It
sounds
cool,
kind of complicated.
I don't know if I can wreck it since I didn't finish reading it.
We can casually mention it exists in this. It
yeah,
sounds like a good idea.
I mean, we just did mention it.
That's good enough.
And you know what? Let's give it some love, because it's really new. Like, it was published last month, so it hasn't got a lot of hits or recognition yet, being just new and a bit niche. So, yeah, it's the 5+ coming outs of Nathan. I haven't seen this show. I'm sorry, I'm saying his name wrong. Maybe Warnos by Nocticola.
Okay, and we'll put it in the link in our new Archive of Our Own account that does exist now.
That's dope.
It's exciting. Where's that drum roll effect?
Yeah, so I'm curious about coming out fics, because
well, actually, I said I've never read ones where people come out to their friends. I didn't even write ones where they came out to their friends, really, except there was kind of one where it sort of happened as a side note. It wasn't about asexuality at all, but there was a little bit of friend knowing another friend was demisexual in one of my fics. So I did pick a rec this time where someone comes out to a friend. I mean, they're a popular ship in the fandom, but technically they are just friends and in canon. And the fic is Jen, so they are still friends in the fic. And and the fic is extremely short, so I don't really want to describe it. I just want you to read it. It's like under 200 words. It is Freedom Lies in Being Bold by Book Girl Fan in the Criminal Minds fandom, about Reed and coming out as asexual. And it was really cute and really relatable to the casual methods of coming out that I've done more recently in my life. It's very different than most of the coming out fics I've read.
Cool.
That was in harmony.
Yeah. For a second, I thought I had an echo, which I kind of did.
Yeah, it is very cool, you guys.
Yes. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and say mine then, because mine is also really short. And admittedly, when we were discussing the topic for this week, I was like, I don't have a lot of fics that involve actual, like, coming out. Like, most of the ones I read, it's like an undernote. Like, the other ones I've recommended have little undernotes of coming out. But again, it's not like a major plot point. It just kind of happens where they happen to be like, oh, well, I'm kind of demisexual, so whatever. And it's never mentioned again. So I had to kind of go hunting through ones that I've seen. And I came back to this other really short one. It's maybe like 600 words. And it's for the My Hero Academia anime universe. And it's called Truth. And it was written by autistic writer. And so basically what happens in this one is that someone kind of accidentally goes through like a reveal, and like there's no like angst about it or anything like that. This is not a sad little fic. It's just kind of, again, a different experience of coming out and how it can happen to someone.
Sounds good. Yeah, I like the idea that it's about the experience of coming out, but it's not super angsty.
Well, and that's like a little bit of angst to it, obviously, because it's kind of like a spur of the moment kind of thing. So there's like a concerned moment where you're like, oh,
yeah,
this is now out in the universe, but it doesn't
right.
end up with any kind of like misery or anything like that.
Yeah. So I need to add a caveat about the one I just recommended. It was dedicated to me. It was written and dedicated to me. It's under 200 words. You don't have to read it, but it was cute and I like it a lot. But also just putting that out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mine's also pretty fluffy. It's maybe a little longer. It's like 7,500 words. It's longer than 200 words, but I've gotten the habit of reading
7,500 words is really long for a fic with prominent asexuality. Let's just put that out there.
That is true.
There's not that many that are that long.
Okay. Yeah. So, the title is Apart, Not Apart. So, the first, to clarify, that's a part, and then it's parentheses, not apart, one word. You with me?
I'm with you.
Okay. By X-Parrot, also one word. This is a Welcome to Night Vale fic. It is Cecil Carlos. That's Cecil and Carlos, not someone named Cecil Carlos. And it's just this really fluffy asexual romance with a little bit of angst, but it's just so cute. They are such a sweet couple, and it's really, I feel, well developed. The whole plotty story is just really interesting to read. When I say plotty story, it's I don't know. I don't want to. Is it plotty? Maybe that's overstating things. Maybe it's understating things. I don't want to give stuff away. Can I just
Rec how you want to rec, and people can complain later to our email or Twitter and tell us that you're wrong.
Or comment on AO3 and be like, I read this and there was too much plot.
Right. We'll adjust as we go forward, maybe, if we have a constructive criticism that we believe is makes some good points. But otherwise, just feel free to be yourself.
Okay. Well, because I feel on the one hand, it's okay, I don't want to give too much away, but on the other hand, it's well, I want to give it a fair shake and be hey, this is a story I really like, and I want to get people excited about it. So I'll say a little more. I guess I really identify with the characterization of Carlos, because they kind of play up that being a scientist angle, and as one does. But I'm also come from that sort of science background and habit of overthinking, which I believe I mentioned earlier.
You did.
So that was oh yeah, it was just true, the whole way through. Yeah. Okay, I'm done wrecking.
So what fandom was your fic again?
Welcome to Night Vale.
Okay.
It's a podcast.
Yes, it's a famous. So it's the most popular podcast among at least fandom
because it's
people.
Amazing.
And I need to listen to it because it has a lot of good ace.
Listen to it, or you know what? Get their books that have the episodes all written down.
Transcriptions.
Yes. I'm sorry, I forgot the word.
Okay.
All right.
So, we should advertise our new Twitter and archive of our own account. We still have the same old email, which is aceinterpretations@gmail.com, and we still would love feedback through email, but we have new options, so take it away.
We now have an archive of our own account. It is Aceinterpretations, and you will actually notice in the About Me section, it says that we are the official one, just in case another random one pops up.
The official Aceinterpretation. They could always just write that
I
they're
literally
official.
Put it in there, so it's just in case.
Yeah.
This is the official one.
Yep, yeah. We're Aceinterpretations, yay. And then we're not Aceinterpretations on Twitter. Quartic, do you want to explain that?
It was one too many characters, and rather than be Aceinterpretation in the singular, we only had this one idea, we decided to be Aceinterpretweets because we are tweeting our Aceinterpretations.
So hopefully it works out, and we would love to hear from our fans. We want to know if you're enjoying this, listening can't get through the episodes because they're too long, whatever, we want to hear what you're saying. Obviously, you're not listening now if you stopped early, but you know what I mean.
Point being, we would love to hear from you guys. Give us subjects. Tell us what you want to hear, too.
Yes.
Fics to rec. You can rec fics to us instead of just, taking fic recs from us. However that conjugates, I don't know.
That's true, because you know what? I need more reading material, people.
Yeah.
Throw it at me.
So,
I will read just about anything.
Yeah. I will say, I don't know, I wanted to end on a good fandom-ish note, because the episode was so lacking on fandom, but I forget what I was thinking. I don't think there was much I had in mind already. I don't think there's much to say.
I mean, I can do a small blurb before we close out, but that's all I got.
This is not a small blurb. This is like something we could have said earlier.
What were you thinking?
Well, talking about coming out, and then ace fic, and it's like, what proportion of ace fic do you think is coming out fic?
I guess it all depends on how you define coming out fic. So I think...
Yeah.
Oh, like the story, revolves around coming out or needing to come out.
First of all, a lot of ace fic is short. So
yeah.
I think the shorter it is, the more likely someone picked just a coming out moment. And that's kind of what I wrecked. And I've seen it in Sherlock fandom with an ace ring, or I think it was Molly or something, various things where that's, my way of coming out. And there's also just, the coming out conversation, the little bit of lead in, a little bit of angsting about what it's going to be like, and then just letting it work out nicely, giving you a nice, validating, happy ending that sometimes people accept you and are happy to still date you, for instance, when you're ace. And then there's other ones. And, I can't do percentage of ace fic for probably anything. It's so hard for me to really have a good handle on what is ace fic, and there are ways to measure statistics probably that we could do if we were really curious, tags on Archive of Our Own, which is where a lot of ace fic is located, although not all of it, but a lot of it. And yeah, so I don't know. I would say we were struggling a little bit to find fics that revolved around coming out, so it's gotta be less than 50%. It's gotta be a kind of lowish percentage, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, the other thing though is as I was going through the tags, it's there was this one bookmark that I had on a fic, and it was it had coming out, I think in the tags, and then asexual character. Great, but it's written from the point of view of a pansexual character who ends up in this poly relationship, and one of the other guys is the one who's ace. So the ace character isn't the one who's doing the coming out in the story. He's
right.
way kind of in the background for the first half of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I was well, that's not really how it works. No, that is how it works. I mean, that's not. It doesn't fit.
Not really the trope you were looking for.
Search. Yeah, exactly.
The point being, it's really hard to nail down that number.
It's hard to nail down that number. I think the more I think about it, the more I have read them, and maybe they're less memorable sometimes, because after a while they kind of are less of the exciting type of story, but they're important. I think they're often combined with a figuring yourself out as ace, which ends up being kind of like Ace 101 and fiction format instead of in Ace 101 website format. It's more like a story of how someone, either understands themselves and or explains to other people what asexuality is. And that means that the focus is more on what asexuality is, and the coming out is just the conclusion or something. Mm-hmm. So it ends up not being the focus exactly, but the shorter it is, the higher percentage of the story was the coming out regardless. And it's not insignificant. It's just, it's not the entire story. And I do think that coming out isn't the entire story in most stories are bigger than the coming out moment. Stories are about the relationships between the two characters, the person that was coming out and the one they were talking to. Story, in real life too, coming out is a story, but the rest of your life matters as well. So it is kind of nice when, I don't know how to put this exactly, but I guess it kind of makes sense that fiction isn't all focused around coming out, like even fan fiction.
Well, and again, it's like that's one moment. There's so much more.
That's a wrap. This is Quartic signing off.
This is KK signing off. Gonna go find a snack.
And this is Love the Heaven. Join us next time for Aros and Genfic.